July 31st, 1999. It was a hot and sticky night in Alabama. The quiet roads around the town of Ozark were peaceful. 17-year-old Tracie Hawlett made a quick phone call to her mother from a payphone at a convenience store called the Big Little. She told her mom that she and her best friend J.B. Beasley were lost. They were trying to find their way to a party. That innocent phone call would be the last time anyone heard Tracie's voice. Their black Mazda car was a gift to J.B. from her father. Later, the car was found left alone on Herring Avenue, less than a mile from that payphone. Inside the car's trunk, police made a terrible discovery. They found the bodies of Tracie and J.B. They had been murdered. Two young women full of life and dreams for their senior year had been killed. At first, people hoped the girls had just run away or were late coming home. But those hopes died when police confirmed what happened. A dangerous person had been there. Someone who was very careful. Someone who left behind a crime scene that offered very few clues right away. For 23 years, the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett haunted Alabama. Two lives ended too soon. Their families, including Tracie's mother, Cheryl, her stepfather, Mike, and J.B.'s mother, Cheryl, and her sisters, were left searching for answers that never came. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light. The algorithm gods will make sure you don't miss any future uploads. J.B. and Tracie's death shocked rural Alabama. It became a scary reminder that dangerous things can happen even in quiet places. In 2019, whispers of an old crime finally found a voice through new DNA technology. The investigation found not a ghost but a real person. A person with a disturbing past. A history of dangerous activities. Someone who had quietly lived in Alabama communities for decades. His terrible secret was carefully hidden. This case shows the never-ending dedication of families who kept hope alive. It shows the commitment of detectives who refused to let time erase the truth. And it shows the powerful impact of modern forensic science in giving voice to those who were silenced. The once peaceful community of Ozark was deeply changed. A cold wind of fear swept through its streets decades after the crime. It forced neighbors to look at each other with new suspicion. The feeling of small-town safety had been torn away. It revealed a deeper, disturbing darkness that would finally crack wide open when the full truth came out 23 years later. The most haunting part? A key person with a chilling history had avoided being caught for far too long. For decades, this person lived a normal life. Perhaps even going to community events, hiding terrible acts behind a mask of everyday life. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always interested to see how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. Today we'll walk through the events of July 1999. We'll trace decades of unanswered questions. And we'll reveal the breakthrough that finally brought justice to J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. This is a story of loss, determination, lies, and finally, justice that came late but was not denied. Arc. Alabama moved at a gentle southern pace in the late 1990s. Sunny days melted into nights with fireflies twinkling. It was a close community with oak-lined streets filled with memories of generations that came before. Friendly faces greeted people from porch swings swaying in the warm breeze. The smell of hickory smoke from backyard. Barbecues mixed with the honeysuckle vines that wrapped around old fences. Mornings began with roosters crowing and boots hitting the pavement as neighbors headed to the local diner. There, sweet tea refills were endless and the gossip was thicker than the grits. Evenings were for Friday night football under the stadium lights, cheering for the Wildcats. In Ozark, life was simple. The sense of belonging was warm and comforting. People were not just individuals, but part of the fabric of a town where everyone knew their name and welcomed them with a smile. About 30 minutes away in the similar town of Dothan, Tracie Jean Hawlett was born on March 3, 1982. She was the only child of Karen and Robert Hawlett, known as Bob. Bob was a well-liked Dothan police officer and Vietnam veteran. Tragically, he drowned in a lake when Tracie was just under 5 years old. His unexpected death was a huge loss for Tracie and her mother. Karen later remarried Mike Roberts. Together they had two sons, Benjamin and Christopher. Mike treated Tracie like his own daughter. The family was very active at Heritage Baptist Church. Tracie often participated in youth groups and taught vacation Bible school. Tracie was known for her loving and giving nature. She rarely argued with her parents. She willingly spent time with her younger brothers. In school, Tracie excelled. She consistently made the honor roll at Northview High School. She was also a majorette and part of the yearbook staff. She dreamed of becoming a missionary doctor. This calling became real after a mission trip to Texas showed her communities with limited healthcare access. To save money for her future, Tracie worked at a J.C. Penney store and babysat for neighbors. She shared a particularly strong bond with her mother, Cheryl, whom she called her best friend. They often enjoyed shopping trips, lunch dates, or sharing coffee. Tracie stood out for her outgoing and bubbly personality. She was always smiling. She had a great sense of humor that made her very popular. She had a wide circle of friends, including her best friend J.B. Beasley, who was in the same grade. Tracie and J.B. shared many similarities. They were both in the same church youth group. They were known for being friendly, hardworking, and outgoing. They even participated in the Miss Spectrum beauty pageant together. Both earned spots in the top 10. They were described as beautiful, both inside and out. J.B. Hilton Green Beasley was born in Troy, Alabama on July 31, 1982. Her mother was Cheryl, and her father was Hilton Lanyard Beasley. J.B.'s unique name was a combination of her father's name, Hilton, and his childhood friend's name, James Buford Green. She always went by the initials J.B. She had an older sister, Liv, who was 7 years older than her. After her parents divorced, J.B.'s mother Cheryl married Joseph Bernard Barron. They had 4 more daughters, Jamie Brooke, Jackie Bernice, Jo Beth Barron, and Jillian. All of them shared the JBB initials. Like Tracie, J.B. had experienced a tragic family loss. In May 1994, J.B.'s older sister Liv passed away at 19. Liv's death made J.B. the oldest sister, a role she took seriously. She acted as a guardian to her younger sisters. Her cousin Lindsay Turner remembered J.B. being kind and patient. She often babysat and prepared lunches for her sisters, whom she loved more than anything in the world. J.B. was a typical 1990s teenager. She was passionate about country music. She was obsessed with Bath & Body Works cucumber melon scent, which she always wore. She and her sisters, along with their mother, even modeled for department stores once. They shared the runway at a Mother's Day fashion show. J.B.'s biggest passion was dance. She excelled in ballet, jazz, lyrical, and tap. She earned many awards, including All-American Cheerleader. Her sister Jo Beth described J.B. as an angel gliding on the stage who was made to dance. Jo Beth dreamed of being like her. After high school, J.B. planned to pursue dance as a career at Texas Christian University. Beyond dance, she kept a spot on the honor roll. She was a member of the Future Business Leaders of America. Her busy schedule included shopping, tanning, and spending time with friends and family. She also worked as a file clerk and receptionist at Southern Clinic. There, she was known for befriending patients. In July 1999, she landed a job as a dance instructor. It was a dream role she sadly never got the chance to begin. Saturday, July 31, 1999 marked J.B.'s 17th birthday. Both she and Tracie were getting ready for their senior year of high school, which was set to start in just a few days on August 3rd. At this time, Cheryl and J.B.'s stepfather Joe had divorced and shared custody of the children. The girls frequently moved between the two households. On that particular weekend, the girls were at Joe's house. They planned to return to Cheryl's on Sunday evening to celebrate J.B.'s birthday and mark the end of summer. J.B. and Tracie decided to go to a field party that night. The plan was for J.B. to spend the night at Tracie's house. The next morning, they would go to church together. Then J.B. had to make it back home in time for her sister Jackie's 10th birthday party. J.B. wouldn't miss her sister's party for anything. She knew how much it meant to be there for Jackie. Around 10 p.m., the two 17-year-old friends left Tracie's house in J.B.'s black 1994 Mazda 929, a gift from her father. They headed out to the field party in Headland, about 20 miles northeast of Dothan. Tracie had a long-standing and strict 11:30 p.m. curfew. Without GPS technology common today, driving the curving, winding roads to Headland and back in time for curfew would be a challenge. It would take about 17 to 20 minutes each way. This left them with only about an hour to spend at the party, if they intended to meet the curfew. It seemed they were planning to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. However, they never made it to that party. They got lost on the way. Without cell phones, they had to find a payphone to call for help. Just after 11:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracie spotted a gas station with an attached convenience store called The Big Little. It was located at 763 East Broad Street in Ozark, Alabama, a small town with about 15,000 people. This location was roughly 23 miles northwest of their homes in Dothan. They were significantly off track from their intended destination of Headland. When the girls arrived at the well-lit store, they found it was closed, but a payphone was available. Tracie used it to call her mother, Carol. Tracie explained to Carol that they never made it to the party because they got lost. At that moment, another car pulled up. A mother and daughter spoke with J.B. and Tracie, giving them directions back to Dothan. Once Tracie understood how to get back, she told this to her mother. Then she asked if she and JB could quickly stop by her boyfriend Wade's house to see him and some friends in Midland City on their way home. This would have been the halfway point between Ozark and Dothan. Cheryl agreed, but with the strict rule that they could only stay for 5 minutes since the 11:30 p.m. curfew had already passed. Tracie agreed, saying, "I love you," before hanging up. After speaking with her mother, Tracie called Wade. They arranged to meet at the Midland City gas station. Cheryl expected the girls to arrive back sometime after midnight, but when over an hour passed, she started to worry. She decided to make some phone calls to find out where the girls might be. Cheryl was not very familiar with JB's mother or stepfather. That weekend, JB's mother, Cheryl, did not have the children. She was working at a tennis shop at a country club and participating in a tennis tournament, finishing around 10 p.m. Coincidentally, this was the same time the girls were heading out of town and unknowingly into Ozark. After work, Cheryl stopped by a friend's house to feed his dog since he was out of town. Around 10:30 p.m., Cheryl decided to stop at a local block party held at a popular restaurant and pub in downtown Dothan called Poplar Head. She met up with a friend, hoping she might run into JB and Tracie to wish her daughter a happy birthday in person. All throughout the night, Cheryl searched the crowd, but of course she never saw them. Without cell phones, even if Tracie's mom had called Cheryl's house, she wouldn't have been home to receive the call. The last time Cheryl and JB talked was Thursday night, 2 nights before her birthday. JB was discussing 2 different dates she had scheduled for Friday night. Before JB left her mother's house, Cheryl had a special birthday wish for her. It was summed up by the Bob Dylan song, "Forever Young." Cheryl shared the lyrics that deeply touched her. She wanted JB to understand the importance of staying forever young at heart. She believed JB had a unique youthful spirit that should never be lost. To further express her wish, Cheryl gave JB a copy of the song. She encouraged her to listen to the lyrics and think about the message. She even suggested that JB's dancing skills would be perfect to create a dance routine to it. No one had any idea what Tracie and JB were going to go through the night of JB's birthday. Finally, Cheryl did get a hold of Wade. What he told her made her even more concerned. He said the girls never showed up at the Midland City gas station. He and his friends waited for at least 30 minutes. But when they didn't arrive, Wade and his friends left. Later that night, he tried calling Tracie at home several times to make sure she made it, but she never answered. Hours were passing with no word from the girls. Cheryl even began calling hospitals in the area to check if the girls were there, but they weren't. Worried and unable to find them, Tracie's stepfather Mike went out and searched parking lots, roads, all around town and beyond. But he found no sign of them or JB's car. When Mike returned without any news, Cheryl called the Dothan Police Department to report the girls missing. It was now 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, August 1st. Cheryl gave the police all the information about the girls. This included when they left, the kind of car they were driving, and that she had spoken to Tracie around 11:30 p.m. the night before, when the girls were at the gas station in Ozark. Meanwhile, Cheryl, JB's mom, had no idea anything was wrong. Around 9:15 that morning, she received a phone call from JB's dance teacher. The teacher asked who was responsible for JB that weekend. Cheryl found this an odd question. When she asked why, the teacher responded, "Oh, it's nothing." This statement left Cheryl unsettled. She decided to go on with her day, heading to the country club. But the strange phone call stayed on her mind. She couldn't help feeling that something was wrong with her daughter. As she carried on her duties at the country club, a family friend approached her. The friend told her that JB and Tracie had not returned to Tracie's house the night before. This was, of course, even more unsettling. However, the first thought was that perhaps the girls were just having a little too much fun and had decided to stay with friends. Cheryl, like most parents, tried not to think the worst right away. She spent the next several hours trying to find out where her daughter was. She had conversations with friends, and then finally the police. She was desperate for information about her now missing teenager, but no one seemed to have any knowledge of where they were. Hours earlier, at 9:00 a.m. that Sunday morning, a patrol officer in Ozark was doing his normal rounds. He was unaware of Tracie and JB's disappearance. He noticed a black Mazda that appeared to be left alone on the side of Herring Avenue. This was a narrow road often used by locals as a shortcut through town. It was located less than a mile from the Big Little store. Photos showed Herring Avenue surrounded by thick woods on both sides. This meant it would be very dark at night. Why would the girls have stopped there? Had they run out of gas? And where were they now? At the time, the patrol officer did not know this car belonged to JB. He did not know it was connected to missing teens. The officer simply reported the car as left alone. Around 10 a.m., the connection between the girls and the gas station in Ozark was made. The Ozark Police Department became aware that the girls had made contact with Carol at the payphone off East Broad Street at the Big Little store. They checked their system and saw the report of the abandoned vehicle that matched the description of the Mazda JB was driving. The car had been found a mere 2-minute drive from the Big Little store where the girls had stopped to call Tracy's mom. Officers went to the location to search for clues. The car was locked with the driver's side window cracked just a little. It appeared the car might have been out of gas. The area around the vehicle was muddy, but the car did not look like it had been forced off the road. There was no visible damage to the outside. Inside, a purse lay on the floor in the front passenger seat. Unable to get in through the locked doors, officers decided to break one of the windows with a baton. Once inside, they found JB's driver's license stuck between the seat and the center console. The purse still had credit cards, jewelry, and cash. This showed that robbery was not the reason, and no one had seemingly forced themselves into the car in that way. Police had been given a description of JB's key ring, which had little white blocks with black letters. One of these had a heart and spelled out, "Hard to get." Despite a thorough search of the vehicle, including underneath the seats, the officers could not find these keys. Without them, they couldn't get into the locked trunk of the Mazda to continue looking for clues. A metal detector was used in the area, but the keys remained undiscovered. At this point, officers from Ozark told the Dothan Police Department that JB's car had been found. A detective came to the scene. Everyone was concerned about this abandoned vehicle, not just because it was linked to their disappearance. The car had several red flags. It was very dirty, as if it had been taken off-road. There was mud on the rear bumper, the wheel wells, and dry sand and mud inside. This was particularly concerning because there were no dirt roads nearby, only a footpath that led into the thick woods. Officers also found smudge marks on one of the back doors that looked like a handprint. They desperately wanted to find a way to open JB's trunk. They searched for an internal release button. If they couldn't figure it out, they were prepared to call a locksmith. While this was happening in Ozark, JB's little sister Jackie was back in Dothan with her dad, waiting to meet up with friends for her pool birthday party. 3 cousins had flown in from Japan to spend time with them before school started after the summer. Everyone was excited to get to the party, but Jackie noticed that her dad had been in and out of the house all morning and seemed worried. She feared they would be late for her own party. They did eventually get there and began having fun. However, after a while she realized that JB had never shown up, and her dad was also missing. That was quite upsetting. She also felt that something wasn't right. When Jackie finally got back home to her dad's later that afternoon, she and her sisters and cousins sensed something was seriously wrong. Their grandmother was in her room with the door closed. They could hear her talking to someone. Her voice was intense. Little 7-year-old Jo Beth could even feel the tension, but no one was saying anything to the children. She felt like the adults were acting strangely, making sure the girls stayed busy, unaware that their older sister was missing. Back in Ozark, the detectives were planning for a tow truck to take the vehicle back to Dothan. As officers waited, the detectives finally realized they could use an internal button to pop the trunk. The simplicity of the trunk release button, located on the driver's side door right next to the gas tank release button, later puzzled people who reviewed the case files. Nevertheless, they finally figured it out. At this point, it was around 2 p.m. When they popped the trunk and officers looked inside, they made a terrible discovery. Both JB and Tracy's lifeless bodies lay right next to each other. This had now tragically turned from a missing persons case into a murder investigation. It was clear that both girls had been murdered. They were fully clothed with mud all over their clothing. Rigor mortis had already reached its peak and was starting to go away. This meant the bodies were changing from stiff to soft again. This made it difficult to determine the exact time of death, especially given the heat. Records showed it was around 100 degrees that day. Overnight, it hadn't even dropped below 81 degrees. What happened to JB and Tracy? The police wouldn't know for sure until the bodies were removed from the trunk and taken to the medical examiner's office for autopsies. While that was being done, both families were being told this heartbreaking news. When Cheryl found out, she said she immediately started to vomit. She could not believe that her little girl was killed on her birthday. She kept imagining JB calling out to her in her last moments, wanting her mom by her side. And she couldn't be there to help her. The shock and sadness overwhelmed her. Her whole world was turned upside down in an instant. In the next few hours, many of her family and friends came to her home to comfort her. It was around 6 p.m. when Jackie remembered hearing her grandmother scream inside her room, followed by crying. Yet still no one had said anything to the kids. Jackie later remembered that night. When her dad finally drove the girls to their mother's house, she said, "As we got close to the house, I immediately noticed the slow funeral sign sitting in the yard. My dad kept telling us that everything was okay, but I knew better. I asked him if my mom was dead and he said no, she's okay. My dad walked us all into the house and I see my mother sitting on the floor crying and people all around her. She grabbed us all and put her arms around us. And while looking at us all in the face, she said, 'JB is dead.' I couldn't understand what she was saying. Those words hit me so hard, I couldn't even speak. All I remember is being silent and walking the house waiting for her to come home any minute. The next morning, I woke up and I heard the shower going. I got up thinking it was JB, and then it hit me that she was never coming back. My world had been turned upside down and our family was never going to be the same. Jackie's last memory of JB was on Saturday morning, the day before Jackie's birthday. JB gave her a big hug and told Jackie she would see her the next day at her party. Jackie remembered JB hugging her for a few seconds and telling her that she loved her. That was the last time I heard her sweet voice and I will never forget it. Jackie later said, JB's family had now experienced not one but two terrible losses. Two of Cheryl's daughters had died just years apart. Just like that, Jamie Brooke became the oldest sister. Just like what happened to JB when Liv passed away. The household of four sisters now had one less. No longer fighting over the bathroom in the morning as they got ready for school. Little Jo Beth, only 7 at the time, remembered the day she got the news her older sister was gone. I remember walking into my mom's house and I saw everyone surrounding our mother and crying, she said. That's when we got the most terrible news. Because I was so young, I didn't quite understand what was going on. I couldn't believe that I wouldn't be able to see my sister again. It was so hard to understand at that time. JB's cousin Lindsay, who had been busy at Auburn University when the news came in, was very upset that she couldn't be with her family. I wanted to stay at my parents' house until we got more news, but I had papers due early that week, so my parents insisted that I head back to Auburn and they would keep me updated, Lindsay explained. That afternoon was torture waiting to hear anything, but I somehow managed to slap together rough drafts of my papers. When I was finished, I jumped in the shower and intended to call my parents as soon as I got out. I had just gotten dressed and was about to dry my hair when I heard a knock at the door. When I looked out, I saw my brother and sister-in-law and I knew right then what they were about to tell me. Opening the door, the look on my brother's face was all I needed. It was like someone had kicked me in the stomach and the pain would never stop. I had experienced many terrible days in my life, including a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler, but the day we lost JB is still by far the worst day of my life. Tracy's mother, Cheryl, and stepfather, Mike, received the terrible news that JB and Tracy had been found. Tragically, they were no longer alive. It was the worst news any parent could get. Cheryl, JB's mother, found it odd that Carol and her husband never reached out to grieve with JB's family. The two families never became close after both their daughters died together. Some people thought that Carol might have held some anger towards Cheryl. It was JB's birthday and Tracy, perhaps more of a follower than a leader, had been going along with JB's plans that night in JB's car. The feelings of grief and blame remained unspoken. Returning to the officers in Ozark, as they prepared to move the victims' bodies, they noticed a 9mm shell casing lying on the bend of one of Tracy's knees. As they carefully looked inside, they concluded that Tracy had been stuffed inside the trunk first. She had a single gunshot wound to her temple. Officers could see a cut on her arm. Under closer inspection, there were briar thorns stuck to her pant legs. She was still wearing a brand new pair of New Balance shoes, which her parents said she had just bought the week before for about $95. But they were now covered in a thick layer of mud. JB appeared to have a gunshot wound to her cheek. She also had mud on her shoes. Both girls' pants were wet from the knees down. Once the girls' bodies were removed from the trunk, the police carefully examined the interior. They concluded that the girls were killed after they were forced inside that trunk, but not at that specific location. This conclusion was based on several reasons. There was an indentation in the trunk where Tracy's head had been. A 9mm shell casing lay where JB's head was positioned. As for why they didn't think the car was in that location when the shots were fired, police kept hearing a dripping sound coming from below the vehicle. When they checked underneath, they found blood that was dripping. There was also blowback, meaning that a bullet had gone through the trunk. The presence of dried blood on the ground and somewhat of a trail, followed by a large puddle, suggested the car had been sitting there for a while before the bodies were discovered. All this evidence led the police to believe the girls were attacked, forced into the trunk and shot somewhere else. The car was then moved to Herring Avenue hours earlier and left there. The police continued checking out the car and found more mud and sand inside, but they noticed it was only on the driver's side floor. This led them to think the killer was the one who drove the car to Herring Avenue and left it there, taking JB's keys. The police also noticed that the rearview mirror was on the floor of the passenger side of the car. This suggested a struggle inside the vehicle, as it would take a lot of force to knock it off. They checked for fingerprints, but the only ones found belonged to the two officers who had searched the car before knowing the girls were murdered. The Ozark police realized they could not investigate these murders by themselves. So the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and other law enforcement agencies were brought in to assist. Meanwhile, Dr. Gregory Wagner performed autopsies on the girls. He concluded that JB was shot in the face at close range and died immediately from a brainstem injury. Gunpowder marks on JB's hand showed the gun had been close to her when fired, but Dr. Wagner could not determine the exact distance. He noted that JB's shoes and the inside of her jeans were muddy. This suggested her pants had been off at one point, which would explain the dirt inside. This was important because it could point towards a possible sexual reason if her clothes had been removed. Dr. Wagner concluded that Tracie died from a gunshot wound to the temple. He also found gunpowder marks on the back of her right hand. He determined the gun was about 2 feet away when fired. He could tell that Tracie's hand was close to her head, not stretched out when the gun went off. Her shoes and her jeans were muddy. There was a bit of blood on her shoes. JB and Tracie did not have drugs or alcohol in their systems, but they did have many scratches and scrapes on their arms. There were no outward signs of forced sexual activity. At first, investigators typically look for tear marks or other signs of injuries to the private area, which were not seen. However, this was later questioned because swabs were taken. JB's swabs tested positive for semen, while Tracie's did not. Further testing and swabbing the girls' bodies and testing their clothing revealed that JB's bra, underwear, and sweater all had traces of semen on them. Her sweater also had blood. A DNA profile was created with this evidence and sent to CODIS, waiting for a potential match. With the autopsies complete, the police focused on figuring out JB and Tracie's last movements. They knew the last time anyone heard from the girls was at 11:30 p.m., when Tracie talked to Cheryl from the Big Little store in Ozark. The girls had mentioned that 2 women had given them directions home. Police wanted to speak to these 2 women. They soon learned they were Marilyn Merritt and her daughter Marielle. They came forward after word got out about the murders. Marielle told police that around 11:30 p.m. on July 31st, she and her mom had gone to the Big Little store for a soda. When they pulled up, they saw one car in the parking lot, a black Mazda. Marielle walked up to the store but found the doors locked, as the store had closed for the evening around 11 p.m. As she was turning to leave, JB approached her. Marielle remembered JB saying her friend was using the payphone to the far right of the parking lot and that they were lost. Marielle gave initial directions to U.S. Highway 231, and then her mom Marilyn added a few landmarks to look out for. Marielle and Marilyn made sure the girls connected with someone on the phone before they left. When the police asked Marilyn and Marielle if the Mazda the girls were driving was dirty, they both said no. The car was spotless and the girls were perfectly clean. Nothing seemed wrong except for them being lost. As the mother and daughter got back into their car and headed out of the parking lot, they looked and saw the girls behind them getting into their vehicle. They then saw them pull to the end of the parking lot and make a right in the direction of the highway, as they were told to do. Other information gathered from JB's family showed she had just filled up her gas tank on Saturday before the girls left for this trip, but the car was found near empty when located. After speaking to Marilyn and Marielle, detectives noted that Herring Avenue, where the Mazda was found, was not on the way back to Dothan. It made little sense how the car ended up there and on empty. Fortunately, the Big Little store did have security cameras, so the police got surveillance video from both inside and outside the store to verify the girls' presence. Unfortunately, the surveillance system was not a typical continuous recording system. It would record for 12 seconds inside the store, then switch to 12 seconds in the parking lot, and so forth for hours. The police sent the tape off to be put together to only include the outside area, and to have it enhanced. When the police received the footage back, they saw something. Even when enhanced, the quality was poor. But they could see JB and Tracie at the time Marielle and Marilyn remembered seeing them. Police noticed something else. A poor quality image of what appeared to be a white foreign-made mid-size pickup truck that had arrived after Mariel and Marilyn had just pulled in. While Tracie and JB were on the payphone, the truck stayed at one of the gas pumps for about 3 minutes and then left shortly before JB's car left. Since the store was closed, no one could have entered to pay with cash. There was no record of a gas purchase at the pump during that period with either a credit card or debit card. The video from the surveillance camera did not capture any clear images of the driver, leaving the identity of the person behind the wheel unknown. Despite efforts from police, they were unable to gather any information about this white truck. They asked the public to help them, but no one came forward with information. The image released to the public was so unclear that it appeared as little more than a blob, making identification nearly impossible. In addition to putting together a timeline for the girls, the police searched for the place where they had been shot. One spot they looked at was near Highway 123, just west of the Big Little store. Someone living in that area reported hearing gunshots around 2:15 in the morning and reported it to the police. When investigators went there, they found shell casings on the road, but eventually they determined this was not the scene of the murder, because the shell casings were not a match. They kept searching hard for weeks, trying to determine where JB and Tracie were killed, but they could not find the spot. By August 8th, a little over a week after the bodies had been found, a hotline was set up to take in tips. A $25,000 reward was offered. Flyers with pictures of Tracie and JB and the Mazda were put everywhere. The police had talked to over 150 people and followed many leads, but progress was slow. The police worked non-stop to solve this case. By August 18th, the reward was over $35,000 and 3 FBI profilers had joined the investigation, hoping this would help them find a suspect. But it didn't. On September 1st, the police released the surveillance footage of the truck, but no one ever came forward with any tips. However, a big break in the case was about to appear. A tip came in from a man named John William Barentine. At 11:30 p.m. on the night of July 31st, 1999, the same night that JB and Tracie got lost in Ozark and were at the Big Little store on the phone with Tracie's mom, John, a 28-year-old part-time mechanic, told his wife he was going to the store to get some milk for their 2-year-old son. According to his wife, he didn't come home until close to 1 a.m. When he came through the door, he appeared very upset. She asked him what happened. He said, "I was hit by a black truck with a Dothan tag near Herring Avenue." JB was from Dothan, and her black vehicle was found on Herring Avenue, though it was a car, not a truck, and there was no damage that would have connected it to any kind of accident. Over the next few days, John began telling his friends and family members that he thought he might know something about the 2 dead girls. John told one of his friends, Leon Jordan, that he thought he might know who did it. Leon told him that if he knew something, he should report it, especially because there was a reward for information leading to an arrest. On September 1st, Leon became aware that John was at the police station being questioned. The next day, September 2nd, the Ozark police shared the big news everyone had been waiting for. They had made an arrest. It came as a surprise to many, but the arrested person was none other than John Barentine, the man they had questioned the day before. At first, the police did not tell the public how he was connected. During a press conference about the arrest, Ozark Police Chief Tony Spivey said he couldn't give out much information, but he was confident they had the right person. He explained that the investigation wasn't over. They were still trying to figure out a reason. The only detail Chief Spivey could share was that John didn't know the girls, and that the murder seemed to be a crime of opportunity. While John's mother and his 3 sisters were visibly upset, they were at this press conference. Afterward, they criticized the police for not sharing the evidence that supposedly linked him to the murders. They claimed he wasn't involved. They described John as a little bit strange, a bit of a loner, but insisted he was not a killer. Jennifer, one of John's sisters, said the police were setting him up for someone else's crime. Angela, another sister, mentioned that on the night of the murders, John did leave home, but only for 15 minutes, not hours as his wife stated, to buy milk at the convenience store off US Highway 231. Angela questioned, "How could my brother commit a double murder in such a short amount of time?" She emphasized that John was soft-hearted, a man who couldn't even bear to see a woman cry, and that he did not own a gun. Following the news of John's arrest, the media interviewed people who knew him. Almost every single one expressed surprise at him being blamed for the murders of JB and Tracie. One neighbor said that John acted a little strange, but she never saw a violent side of him. He was always really friendly to her. She never would have thought he'd be capable of murder. A regular customer at the service station where John worked said he was always really sweet to her. She'd never even seen him upset. She was never scared of him. She didn't think he had it in his nature to kill. Even John's boss expressed disbelief. He didn't think John was responsible. He echoed feelings across town. He added that he wanted to know what police had against John and why they weren't talking about it. Days later, on September 9th, there was still no news about John's supposed connection to the murders. Chief Spivey said again that he understood the public had questions, but it wasn't the right time to give more details as it was an ongoing investigation. He assured everyone that he was confident the police had arrested the right guy. On September 20th, a hearing was held to determine if the state had enough evidence to go forward with charges against John Barentine. This was the first time anyone outside the police department heard the evidence against him. During that hearing, the police finally shared that a few days after JB and Tracie were killed, they received a tip that led them to John. This tip came from a clerk at a video store. The clerk told police he had recorded a conversation with a man named John. John wanted to check the surveillance tapes from the Big Little store. He claimed a fight had broken out on July 31st and he needed the tape to figure out the exact time. It struck the clerk as very odd that John was asking about a video from the exact night and place where the girls were last seen, near where a murder had taken place. This prompted him to record the conversation. The clerk told the police he did not know John's last name, but knew he had an account under Mary or Barry Barentine with an address of 109 Young Avenue in Ozark. When police went to that location, it didn't exist. However, they were able to find a Mary Barentine at 110 Young Avenue who was married to a man named John. They spoke to her. When asked where her husband was on July 31st, Mary first said he left around 11 p.m. to buy milk for their son and was only gone for 15 minutes. She then changed her story, saying it could have been longer. She explained she wasn't sure because John had taken her watch with him. Mary then claimed that when John got back, she thought it had been at least an hour, maybe even 2. When she asked him why it took so long, he told her that a black truck had forced him off the road off of James and Herring Avenue, almost the exact location where JB's Mazda was found. The police then talked to John at his workplace about this black truck. John claimed that when he went out to get the milk, he took the long way to grocery outlet going down James Street. He said that a black truck with tinted windows and a 38 car tag came off Herring Avenue, hit his car, and then drove on to Matthew Street. John told the police that he arrived at the grocery outlet to buy milk at 11:35 p.m. On his way home, he kept checking to see if the black truck was following him. Once back home, he claimed he couldn't sleep. So he took a shower and then watched Rocky III until 3 a.m. The next day, he told police he used a rag to buff out the damage the black truck had supposedly done to his car. He then began telling his friends and family members that he thought there might be a connection between the black truck that hit him and the murders, given the close location. Before he could come forward with any information, the police had already tracked him down. They wanted to see the rag he used to buff his car, hoping it would have traces of black paint. When John showed up as requested, he did not bring the rag, but he did show the police where he claimed he was hit. An officer experienced in accident investigations believed there was no damage to John's car. He said it had never been hit by a black truck or any vehicle. The police then confronted John, stating that the grocery outlet closed at 9 p.m., making his story about buying milk there that night impossible. Caught in a lie, John admitted, "You're right, I lied. I just wanted to collect the reward money." The police asked John to tell them what really happened on the night of July 31st. The following 4-hour videotaped interview saw his story change at least 6 times. First, he told them he was home all night. But Mary, who was also at the police station being questioned, said the opposite. She insisted he definitely left for milk. John then changed his story again, saying he actually went to the BP gas station on US 231 to buy milk. He was there for 20 minutes and then drove home. He claimed that on his way home, he passed the Big Little store where he saw JB and Tracie on the payphone outside. Then John told the police another story. In this version, he claimed a man with tattoos who worked for his uncle and lived in a White House nearby was the one who killed Tracie and JB. According to John, when he left for the store, he picked this man up at a 4-way stop sign. As they passed the Big Little, the man saw JB and Tracie and suggested to John that they get some. This immediately got the detectives' attention, as they were already aware of a possible sexual reason. John said he pulled into the parking lot. The tattooed man went up to talk to the girls. Then he climbed into the back seat of the Mazda on the driver's side, while one of the girls was still on the phone. Eventually, the girls drove off with that man in their car, and John followed them thinking the man might need a ride. The Mazda stopped on Herring Avenue, So John parked on James Street, turned his lights off, and shut off his engine. He claimed he could somehow hear the conversation the man was having with the girls. According to John, this tattooed man and the girl who drove the Mazda got out of the car. John claimed to hear the girl say, "I thought you were going to give us directions. What are we doing in the woods?" And the tattooed man replied, I will. But first you gotta give me some." John said he saw the girl who had been sitting in the passenger side get out and start to run, but the tattooed man grabbed her and dragged her back to the car. John then claimed he watched the man put both girls into the trunk and heard 2 gunshots. Then the tattooed man frantically ran to John's car and told him to get inside. He jumped in with the Mazda's keys in one hand and a gun in the other. John said they drove around for a while until he let the man out somewhere in Ozark. That was quite a story. Many of the things he said actually matched up. But how did he know all that? John was arrested after telling all these different stories to police. Even though he said there was another guy there, John put himself at the location where the girls were last seen. He seemed to know too much information not to be involved. So they arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of capital murder. At John's hearing, the police testified that they investigated John's claims about this tattooed man killing JB and Tracie, but they eventually ruled him out as a suspect when 3 people confirmed that man was with them on the night of the murders. At that point, the police were convinced that John and a second unknown suspect were actually the ones involved in the murders, so the investigation continued. There was also evidence that after John was arrested, his cellmate came forward claiming John confessed to the murders. This only helped make their case against John stronger. At the hearing, John's defense argued there were too many unanswered questions to take these charges any further. There was no reason, no evidence John owned a gun, and the gun was never found. There was no physical evidence tying John to the murders, because at this point the DNA had been analyzed. When it was put into CODIS, there was no match. The detectives believed John and another unknown suspect were involved in the murders. So perhaps John wasn't the one who engaged in sexual relations. The defense mentioned that John had since taken back all of his stories, stating he went to the police only for the reward money. The prosecution, of course, countered this statement, claiming John didn't go to the police for the reward money. The police approached him after hearing from the video store clerk. At the end of the hearing, Judge Buddy Matthews found that there was enough evidence to at least keep John behind bars until the case could be sent to the grand jury in January of 2000. By the middle of October, John had a court hearing to decide if he was going to stay in jail without bail. During this hearing, his defense attorney did something unusual. They had John get on the stand so that he could tell the judge he had nothing to do with JB and Tracie's murders. John said he lied about everything. He lied about seeing the girls get killed. He lied about all those stories. He just wanted money to pay off his bills. He claimed he was tired and confused during that long interview with police. He just said what they wanted to hear so he could go home. At the end of the hearing, the judge decided that John should stay in jail without bail. He ordered John to provide a DNA sample for testing against the semen found on JB. John's friends and family stood by him. His mother, Faye, said he didn't do it. He's not capable of doing it, emphasizing that he had a 2-year-old son and was not capable of doing anything to hurt a child. In early November, John's attorney announced the DNA did not match. The police, however, stated this didn't change their investigation. They still firmly believed that John and another person were involved. But after this news did come out, Judge McLean lowered John's bail to $200,000. In mid-December, he somehow posted that bail. On January 10, 2000, the grand jury decided not to charge John with murder. At first, the police made it seem like they were going to continue this investigation into John. But soon, they announced he was no longer considered a suspect. They were back at the beginning. The big question was what they were going to do next. It seemed they had wasted a lot of time pursuing a man who ultimately didn't seem connected. A few days later, they increased the reward to $45,000. A new team of investigators joined the Ozark Police Department to help. They kept working hard on this case, but the lead slowed down. Months passed with fewer and fewer results. After the tragic murder of JB and Tracie, a memorial fund was set up in JB's honor at the Compass Bank in Dothan. This fund's goal was to sponsor a free performing arts camp for poor children and to fund a piece of dance to be created annually in honor of JB. Parents and students at the dance school where JB performed were responsible for this fund. They were driven by a desire to honor her memory by positively impacting the lives of children in their community. The community came together in other amazing ways. Central Phoenix High School, the rival to Northview High where JB and Tracie attended, decided to show their support after the murders. At their very first pep rally, Central Phoenix High School sent a banner to Northview that said a heartfelt message: "Rivals, yes, but friends nonetheless." It was a touching display of unity, though sadly under tragic circumstances. Just a few months into the new year, in February 2002, teenage girls were found dead in Mississippi. They had been shot in the back of the head and left on the side of the road. The victims were Amanda Welburn and Kelsey Bullock. Police began investigating a possible connection between these two cases. However, after doing a thorough investigation, it was determined there was no connection between them. Two men, Paul Evans Jr. and Nathan Townsend, were eventually arrested for the murder of Amanda and Kelsey. Both were convicted and sentenced. There were other leads and suspects, including one from Battle Creek, Michigan. Police did not share the person's name. They noted that he was at a party the night of the murders, right near where JB's car was found. He then left town within days of the murder. To further investigate this possible connection, they interviewed the suspect and traveled to Michigan on several occasions. This man was unable to account for 3 or 4 hours on the night of the murders. He made statements that were suspicious to police. However, his DNA failed to match the DNA discovered at the crime scene. Eventually, the police had to move on and focus their attention elsewhere. At the 1-year mark, the case was going cold. Cheryl, JB's mother, wanted to keep the girls in the news and in the public eye. She thought of an idea to place the girls' photos on utility bills and on envelopes until the murder investigation was solved. Cheryl also wanted the girls' pictures displayed in public places like sports centers. She asked the city to donate the Civic Center to host a charity ball in honor of the girls, with money going towards funding billboards. Meanwhile, Tracy's parents, Mike and Carol Roberts, created a memorial at the spot where JB and Tracy's bodies were found, 2 white crosses. By August 2000, Mike had to replace the crosses for a 3rd time as the first 2 had been stolen. The 3rd time, Mike installed the crosses using quick-dry cement, making it harder for thieves to steal them. Mike Roberts told the media that he promised to get justice for his stepdaughter Tracy, even if it meant dedicating his last breath to the effort. A bumper sticker on the back of his truck read, "Someone I loved was murdered." That same month, August 2000, America's Most Wanted filmed a special on this case. The host, John Walsh, traveled to Dothan, Alabama to film a reenactment of the murders of JB and Tracy. The purpose of this episode was to create new and relevant information about the case. It focused heavily on the white pickup truck seen in the Big Little parking lot at the same time the girls were making that phone call. However, at the time, Cheryl was not aware they were going to show a reenactment of her daughter's murder. Cheryl told the media that watching that episode was going to be really scary for her. Police ended up with many tips after the segment aired, but nothing relevant. In December 2000, a tip was received at Crime Stoppers. It stated that a weapon used in the murder of JB and Tracy could be located in a creek in northern Dale County. The tip said the gun was underwater 6 to 8 feet. Divers were sent to search by hand, spending several days searching the creek. But no weapons were found. So many potential leads led nowhere. JB's mother Cheryl was invited to do a segment on the Maury Povich show titled "I Need to Solve My Child's Murder." The episode aired in January 2001. Cheryl sat with 4 other parents of murdered children, sharing their stories and their hope of seeking justice for their loved ones. The decision to appear on this show was not easy for Cheryl. It required flying to New York to film in immense emotional strength and courage. However, she felt it was one of her last opportunities to do something big and find answers about who murdered her daughter. Knowing they had to keep attention on the case, there were other suspects in question, but each one was thoroughly investigated. After years went by, the murders still remained unsolved. Tracy and JB's friends and family were still holding on to hope for justice. Every year on the anniversary of their tragic deaths, their loved ones would gather at the site where the car was discovered and honor them. 16 years later, in 2015, the Thursday Review published 2 write-ups about JB and Tracy's case. They interviewed JB's sisters Jo Beth, Jackie, her mom Cheryl, and her cousin Lindsay. This provided much of the detailed information about who JB was and how everything happened on that fateful day. The family, notified back in 1999, had endured 16 long years with no answers. The article included a picture of 20-year-old Jillian, 23-year-old Jo Beth, 26-year-old Jackie, and 27-year-old Jamie posing with a portrait of their late sister JB Beasley, who would have been 33 years old that year. They promised they would never give up hope that her killer would be found. Jackie mentioned that she thought of JB every time the clock hit 11:11, because JB used to stop and say, "Make a wish." When asked if Jackie thought JB knew her killer, she responded that she thought it could be someone they knew, or possibly an authority figure. She believed her sister would not have pulled over for anyone else, especially at that time of night. When asked what they did to keep this case alive, Jackie said they created a Facebook group for JB and Tracie, which had almost 4,000 members. They were selling vinyl stickers that read, "Justice for JB and Tracie," and using the money to raise awareness for the case. They also planned events like a car wash and a 5K to raise money. They said they would never stop searching for answers. When Cheryl was interviewed, she told the reporter that after 16 years, she still lived in the same area. In 2006, she graduated from Troy University with a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. The murder of JB had left her relationship with her other daughters very strained. She loved them dearly, but it was difficult for her to remain close, especially since one of them looked strikingly similar to JB. This, she explained, was incredibly tough for her, showing the widespread effects of the murder. The 20-year anniversary of JB and Tracie's unsolved murders approached. The Ozark Police Department was desperate to solve this case and willing to try anything. They decided to work with Parabon Nanolabs, specializing in genetic genealogy. The lab used advanced genetic testing techniques and their knowledge to identify potential suspects through DNA databases and by matching them to family trees. This method allows police to identify a potential suspect by looking at DNA from family members who are willing to share that DNA in a genealogy database. This helps investigators create a broader family tree than before. The lab narrowed down the results to only 5 people. When Ozark Chief Marlos Walker saw the list, one name stood out: Coy Lewis McCraney. He and the chief had actually gone to high school together in Dothan. Chief Walker looked back through the files and found that Coy, who had only been 23 at the time of the murders, was never questioned and never considered a suspect. He didn't have a criminal record, so his DNA wouldn't have been in CODIS. This meant a match wouldn't have been found earlier through that system. Police checked into Coy's background and learned he was born in 1974 in Quincy, Florida. His family then moved to Ozark, Alabama when he was 3 or 4 years old. Coy grew up with his 3 older sisters. His dad was a carpenter and his mother worked at a nursing home. While a junior at Carroll High School, Coy started dating a woman named Zafri. They had a child before Coy graduated in 1992. He and Zafri married that same year and welcomed another child. Coy then joined the Air Force, supporting his family while stationed in Mississippi. Interestingly, police noted that Coy had registered a 9mm pistol he had received during his military service, the same type of gun used to kill JB and Tracie. In 1994, Coy and Zafri divorced. Coy left the military, receiving a general discharge. He stayed in the Ocean Springs area, working at a casino and then a fire department. He soon began dating a woman named Cindy. They also welcomed a child together. He then moved to New York, but that relationship didn't last. So Coy returned to Ozark and moved in with his mother. He worked various jobs before entering the semi-truck industry. He went to school in 1997 and started dating a woman named Diana, with whom he had another child a year later. Coy finished school and became a long-haul trucker, working 3 or 4 weeks on and then coming home for a few days. He moved into a home on Lindy Drive in Ozark, about a half a mile away from both the Big Little Store and Herring Avenue, where JB's car was found. This meant that Coy lived within a short walk of where JB and Tracie were last seen and where their bodies were found. There were many connections here, with the most important being his DNA, which was a match to the DNA found inside JB's body. About a year before the murders, in March 1998, Coy had begun dating a woman named Jeanette. She moved into Coy's house just a few months later in June. Coy and Jeanette then bought some land next to Coy's mom's house. However, before they could move into a trailer on that land, Coy had to clear it out, which he did when he wasn't driving his semi-truck. Coy was not faithful to Jeanette. In September 1998, a woman claimed he was the father of her child. A judge ordered a DNA test on July 30th, 1999, just 1 day before the murders of JB and Tracie. Despite being ordered to take this test, Coy never showed up. He chose instead to pay child support without providing his DNA. Over the next few years, there were many requests for child support, accusing him of not paying. In mid-August 1999, Coy and Jeanette moved onto the land they had bought. On June 25, 2001, they got married. They welcomed 2 children. Coy kept working as a trucker. Fast forward to late 2018. Coy and Jeanette were married and living in Dothan. Their daughter was a high school senior. Their son was in college. Coy was still a trucker. But now he also ran a religious nonprofit called Spirit and Truth Lifeline Ministries. He served as a bishop and preacher at a local church. He seemed to be on the straight and narrow. Could he have been involved with the murders? To find out, Chief Walker got in touch with 45-year-old Coy in January 2019. He asked if he would help by giving his DNA to build out a family tree for a case he was working on. Coy asked his wife what he should do. She replied, "You have nothing to hide." So he decided to give a sample of his DNA. When his DNA was compared to the semen evidence from JB's body and clothing in late February, that match was made. The odds of the semen coming from anyone else were extremely rare. 1 in 122 non-alien, 122 followed by 30 zeros. This proved that Coy had sexual relations with JB, but it didn't prove he murdered anyone. However, when police looked for any connection between Coy, JB, and Tracie, there was none. There would be no reason for his DNA to be on JB's clothes or body. They weren't dating and they didn't have any friends in common. Something wasn't adding up. Coy was placed under police watch until an arrest could be made. On March 15th, Coy was finally arrested and taken to the station for questioning. The detective's first question was if he knew about JB and Tracie's murder. He said he had heard about it through town but claimed he didn't know them and had never met them before. "Really?" the detective pressed. That's when the detectives told him his DNA matched the DNA found in the murder. Coy took a deep breath, turned his face away from detectives and muttered, "This can't be happening." The detective suggested going back to the beginning and discussing his background. Coy then told the story of his life again, but when detectives again stated they had his DNA and knew he killed the girls, Coy asked for an attorney. Detective Michael Bryan responded by saying, "Let me explain something to you. There's no lawyer that can change any facts of this case." Coy kept asking where his lawyer was. Bryan kept saying, "We haven't called a lawyer." Coy asked if he could call one himself. The detective replied, "Coy, all I want from you, just listen to me. Just listen to me for a second. Listen to me. What I want from you is the complete truth. You know what? Look." He then grabbed a folder, shuffled through printed photos and said, "Let me show you again." Coy asked if he could get a lawyer. Bryan said absolutely, but he didn't end the interview. Instead, he put a photo of Coy's family on the table in front of him. Then he added a second photo of JB and then of Tracie during their autopsies. Coy asked him, "So we're not going to do the lawyer?" Bryan responded, "We can do the lawyer if you want a lawyer." "Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't want that to get misunderstood. All I want you to be aware of what the facts are of this case. And the facts are that Coy Lewis McCraney's DNA matches the DNA found on the murdered body of JB, Beasley." Bryan then told Coy he was going to tell the district attorney's office that Coy was a savage individual who kidnapped the girls, viciously attacked them, forced one of them to have sex with him, and then intentionally killed both of them. Bryan removed the photos from the table. Coy asked, "Are you putting that on me?" Bryan said, "Coy, you're the only one that can give the truth." Coy continued asking for an attorney. In response, Bryan put more photos on the table in front of him. Coy said he didn't have to do that. Then the detectives left him alone for 10 minutes. The detectives later told Coy they weren't going to ask any more questions. They only wanted to tell him that he was going to be charged with 5 counts of capital murder and a sex crime in the first degree. Coy just replied, "Come on, man." But Bryan continued trying to get him to talk. At one point, Coy started to cry and said he never hurt anyone, ever. The interview finally ended and Coy remained in police custody. Coy's wife, Jeanette, was also questioned and asked what she knew about the murders of JB and Tracie. She said she had heard about them but had no knowledge of what happened. Detectives then told Jeanette that Coy's DNA was a match for the semen found on JB. Jeanette stated all that proved was that Coy had sexual relations with JB. It didn't mean he was a murderer. Jeanette did not think Coy was guilty and remained faithfully by his side. Surprisingly, many people who knew Coy thought he was innocent. Jeanette defended him during news conferences, stating that she wanted to let people know that he didn't force himself on anyone and he didn't murder anybody. She described Coy as a family man who pushed his children to succeed in school and even quizzed her on Bible history. Chief Walker, who knew Coy, said he was very surprised when Coy's name matched the DNA. "Every person I talked to said the same thing," he stated. "But DNA doesn't lie." Of course, many people were thankful that Coy had been arrested and the case had been seemingly solved. Tracie's mom and stepfather, Cheryl and Mike, spoke to the media. Mike stated, "We've been through pure hell for the last 20 years. I know we're going to have to go through a lot more because we're going to have to relive it again, and I'm ready to relive it. I'm going to put somebody behind bars, Get them tried and get this over with. Maybe we can sleep at night then. Mike and Carol added they'd like to see Coy get the death penalty. Carol expressed, I sat down and read Exodus where it says that if you take a person's life, you should have to give up your life. That's the law. And I honestly believe that should be what happens. They were both in favor of the death penalty because Coy had lived for 20 years in freedom. In their view, he should not live a day more on Earth. They believed it needed to be done quickly. JB's mom did not speak to the media following the news of Coy's arrest, but it was safe to assume she was also grateful that the case had been solved and an arrest made. On the other hand, JB's biological father, Hilton, was doubtful. He questioned whether the police actually had the right guy. He told reporters that his legal advisor told him it would have been difficult for just one person to have committed such a terrible double murder. Hilton stated, This is not the work of a single person. We may be wrong, but my attitude is I just have to wait and see. After Coy was charged, the defense got ready for trial and considered two possible other suspects to present to the jury, John Barentine and a former Ozark police officer. The defense wanted to suggest that John Barentine, who had passed away, might have been the killer, but the prosecution argued there was no evidence to support that claim. The judge sided with the prosecution and stopped the defense from bringing up John. The defense also explored the idea that a former police officer might be responsible. This officer came to the defense's attention through a blog post in 2015. The post claimed that a woman named Marina Crum knew what happened to JB and Tracie. She claimed a former officer, in a drunken state, confessed he was involved in the murders to hide cassette tapes revealing local cops' involvement in the drug trade. These strange twists in the case added intrigue. After the blog was published, this former police officer filed a lawsuit against Marina for lying about him. Marina's claims gained a lot of public attention. Many believed she was going to be a crucial witness for the defense. But during the hearing, she admitted it was all a lie, so the defense could no longer use her as a witness and lost all their alternative suspects. Now they had to come up with a totally different plan. The trial for 49-year-old Coy McCraney began on April 19, 2023. Led by Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall, the prosecution presented the jury with a detailed account of JB and Tracie. They emphasized their friendly personalities, their promising futures, and the lives cut short. The prosecution theorized that on July 31, 1999, after JB and Tracie got lost on their way to a party, asked for directions at the Big Little store in Ozark, and used a payphone to call Tracie's mom, Coy confronted the girls at gunpoint. He ordered them into JB's car and made her drive to a marshy area. There he commanded JB to undress and forced her to have sex with him. When he was finished, he forced both girls into the trunk. Coy then shot JB and Tracie at close range. Later, he drove the car to Herring Avenue and walked home to his nearby house. The prosecution argued that even though neither girl's autopsy showed signs of private area injuries, such injuries were not necessary to classify the act as forced. Forensic experts testified that both consensual and non-consensual sex may or may not produce injuries. The Attorney General ordered Jeanette, Coy's wife, to testify at trial. She had not been married to Coy at the time of the murder, so she did not have any marriage protections. Jeanette testified about what happened on July 30th, 31st, and August 1st she said Coy returned from a long-haul trucking job on the 30th. The next day, Jeanette went to work while Coy went to their land to clear it out. According to Jeanette, she arrived home from work around 8 p.m. Coy came home shortly afterward at 8:20 p.m. He was sweaty from working outside, so he took a shower. 2 hours later, close to 10:30 p.m., she said Coy left to visit his mom's house as he hadn't seen his family in weeks. Jeanette remembered that Coy returned home right before 1 a.m. She knew this because they had a rule that after 11:30 p.m., the chain had to go on the door. She had locked the chain lock at that point and gone to the couch to watch TV. When Coy came home, Jeanette was still awake and the chain was on the door, so she had to get up and open the door for him. She clearly remembered the time. Jeanette stated Coy's clothes were completely clean. There were no signs of blood or mud. He told Jeanette that his car had broken down at the Big Little store, forcing him to walk back home. He asked her to come with him and jump his car. So Jeanette left the house, drove with Coy to the store, and they were able to jump his car before returning home. Getting back at 1:20 a.m., they slept for a few hours. Then later that morning, they got up and went to Walmart to buy supplies for his car and for the road, as Coy had to leave that very next evening. They didn't talk for the next 3 or 4 days, which was typical because Coy didn't have a cell phone, only a pager. Jeanette testified that a few days after the murders happened, her mom told her what happened. Jeanette thought about reaching out to the police since she and Coy had been to that same Big Little store on the same night. But in the end, she didn't contact them because she had only seen Coy's broken-down car at the store, no one else and no other vehicle. There was nothing suspicious in her mind. Jeanette said she never heard anything that would show that Coy met, had sex with, or killed JB and Tracie. However, Jeanette's testimony placed Coy's car in the exact same parking lot where the girls were on the same night, and his DNA had been found on JB. Still, the defense argued the wrong person was arrested. They claimed that JB had consensual sex with Coy on the night she was killed. According to the defense, on July 31st, Coy, then a 23-year-old player, met JB and Tracie at the Big Little store. He gave them directions, then hopped in JB's car and they continued talking. Eventually, they decided to have consensual sex. When they were done, the girls dropped Coy off at his house. The defense claimed that someone else then killed JB and Tracie. This theory seemed far-fetched. Tracie and JB had already received directions from Marilyn and Marielle and were on a mission to get back to Tracie's. They even called Tracie's boyfriend Wade to say they were on their way. Why would they then entertain a random guy? And why would Tracie just stand by while her friend had quick sex with him, only for them to coincidentally be killed by someone else immediately afterward? It stretched believability. The defense, however, emphasized there was no evidence proving Coy was the killer. The only evidence tying Coy to the girls was semen, which they claimed came from consensual sex, not forced. The defense also told the jury that in 2019, during Coy's arrest, the police treated him horribly. They used tactics they compared to Nazi Germany. As revealed in the earlier story, Coy requested a lawyer 8 times but wasn't given one. He then spent 25 hours in that interrogation room, sleeping on a mat on the ground. However, these circumstances did not change the fact of his DNA being present. Chief Walker was called to testify and said they delayed taking Coy to jail to wait for a search warrant and to tie up loose ends. The chief argued that Coy was fine. He was moved into a conference room, given meals, and they talked about other things besides the murder, like high school basketball and football. During the trial, the defense only called a few witnesses, including a newspaper delivery person, a man who lived on Broad Street, the same street as the Big Little store, and Coy McCraney himself. The newspaper delivery person, Dan Shaw, testified that he was delivering newspapers in Ozark around 2:15 in the morning on August 1st. He noticed a Mazda with emergency lights on at James Street and Herring Avenue. Dan said he saw the car several times during his deliveries that morning. On a second sighting, a Mercury Grand Marquis was parked behind the Mazda with 2 people and a young person inside. He said he thought it was an undercover police car due to the strobe lights. Dan mentioned seeing the Mazda again around 2:00 a.m., this time with an Ozark Police Department car nearby. Later, around 7 a.m., the Mazda had been moved to Herring Avenue. It wasn't until Dan saw the news article about JB and Tracie's murders that included a picture of the car that he realized the importance. He contacted the police and shared what he had seen. The defense also called a man named Jimmy who lived on Broad Street in 1999 to testify. He said that around 11:20 p.m. on July 31st, he was cleaning his balcony when he noticed a white truck and a Mazda driving down the road crossing with Broad Street. The cars were moving at a moderate speed without being aggressive. They entered the parking lot and turned off their lights. Jimmy then heard a noise. After 15 minutes, both cars drove towards the Big Little store. Jimmy could see the outline of a man in the truck, but couldn't identify anyone that was in the Mazda. At first, he didn't think much of it until he saw the picture of the Mazda in the newspaper. Finally, Coy McCraney himself took the stand in his defense. The man was obviously nervous and his testimony was shaky. He claimed he already knew JB. According to Coy, the two of them met in June 1999 at the mall in Dothan, where he had dropped off his girlfriend Jeanette at work. He said he stopped at Radio Shack and JB happened to be nearby. So they talked and JB introduced herself as Jennifer. Coy claimed that's how he knew her, never knowing her name was JB. This statement was strongly disputed by everyone who truly knew JB. Throughout her entire life, she made sure people knew her name was JB, not Jennifer. Her name actually stood for James Buford, which Coy would never have guessed. Coy went on to tell the jury he gave this girl Jennifer, as he called her, his mom's home phone number instead of his own. He didn't have a cell phone and didn't want JB to call his house while his girlfriend was around. Coy said Jennifer called him at his mom's house on the same day they met and then again in July. They had plans to meet up whenever they could. However, they didn't actually get to see each other until July 31st. the night she was murdered. It was remarkably coincidental that she happened to get lost right near his house, a place she had never been to. Coy claimed he returned home from the long-haul trucking job on July 30th and parked his truck at the truck stop on County Road 18. He explained his semi was too big to park at home. Then on July 31st, he worked on the land he and Jeanette owned next to his mom's place. Around 3 p.m., he claimed Jennifer called him at his mom's, and they planned to meet at his old high school in Ozark at 10 p.m. This made no sense, given the girls were lost in Ozark, had no idea where they were, and were headed to a party in a totally different direction. But Coy still tried to make it seem logical. He then said later that night he drove to the Big Little store, waiting for JB until 10 p.m. It was never explained why he claimed to have waited at the store instead of the high school, further adding problems to his story. Again, the girls pulled into the first place they saw that they thought was open. Coy then stated that when Jennifer didn't show up around 10 or 10:30 p.m., he returned to his mom's house as that was the only way Jennifer would be able to contact him, but she never called. So he just spent time with his family before leaving around 11:45 p.m. On the way home, his car started to act up, and then it broke down. But somehow he coasted right into the Big Little parking lot. What a coincidence. He expected the jury to believe that at the same time the girls happened to get lost, he went to the same spot and broke down. Good thing his car made it. He said after breaking down he looked over and noticed, "Oh my gosh, Jennifer. She's at the payphone." The absurdity of the story was clear. Coy then claimed he went up and talked to the girls. JB mentioned she was running a little late to get home. Coy told her he knew a shortcut back to Dothan and asked if they could drop him off on their way since his car was clearly broken. The girls agreed. He sat in the back passenger seat of the Mazda. This is the part that some observers believed might contain a bit of truth. He said at 11:45 p.m., they left the Big Little. During that drive, Coy chatted with JB while Tracie seemed lost in her own thoughts. About 8 minutes later, they were near the truck stop where Coy parked his semi, so he suggested they stop and take a look at his truck. They pulled over. JB and Coy got out and they got in the front seat of his semi-truck. Tracie stayed in the Mazda. Coy said one thing led to another and they ended up having sex in a bed he had in the back of his semi. The defense asked if he had forced JB into the truck. He said, absolutely not. After they had sex, they talked. Then JB mentioned she was in a hurry to meet someone. They got out of the truck, back into the Mazda. Then Coy asked to be dropped off on Broad Street to avoid being seen by Jeanette. He said the girls dropped him off about 12:30 in the morning and he walked home. Coy then explained that's when he asked Jeanette to go help him jump his car at the Big Little store. They jumped the car and were back home at around 1 a.m. Coy said he stayed home for the rest of the night. The next day, they went to Walmart before he left for his long-haul truck trip. Coy testified he only learned about the murders weeks later when Jeanette told him. He expected the jury to believe he never tried to reach out to Jennifer again, never called her, never saw her again, never tried to reach out again. It was just this random one-night stand. It was unlikely he wouldn't have heard she was murdered if he tried to get in touch with her after the fact. Coy said he gave his DNA because he had nothing to do with the murders. He was shocked when he was arrested because he had no idea what it could be about. He claimed he never told the detectives that he knew the girls when they asked him because he was scared. He figured that once they put him in handcuffs, they had already made up their minds. He expected the jury to believe he never saw pictures of these girls in all the newspapers in the small town. This was a big story featured on TV shows. He couldn't have at least recognized the woman even if he didn't know her name and come forward to say he was with her that night. During the cross-examination by the prosecution, they poked holes in his story one after the other. One of the first things they wanted to know was how JB knew to call Coy's mom's house that night on the 31st. He explained, "Oh, well, I told her I was only there on the weekends, so that's when she would call." The prosecution brought out a notepad, on which they had been writing down things he said happened on July 31st. This is where they put all the problems on display for the jury. According to Coy, he had plans to meet with JB at 1 p.m., describing this as a date. The prosecution pointed out this was a remarkable coincidence. He responded, "I guess so." The prosecution explained that Mariel and Marilyn placed Tracie on the phone with her mom at 11:40 p.m. However, the women could not remember seeing anyone else there at the time, but he claimed he pulled in around 11:35 p.m. When explaining how they had sex, he said they were just talking, and then JB got onto the bed and Coy joined her. They started touching each other. He said it all happened pretty quickly, and they were done by 12 a.m. The prosecution kept challenging Coy's account, stating that it just didn't add up. They carefully went through what Coy said and found problems in every part of his story. The timeline didn't match. The evidence didn't make sense. The prosecution further raised questions about why Coy first told them that he didn't even know JB and Tracie. They explained he was only saying he knew them now because he had to find a way to explain why his semen was found. So he made up a story about consensual sex, a story that made no sense. The prosecution argued that the dirt on the inside of JB's jeans didn't come from consensual sex in the back of a truck. It came from being attacked and forced to undress by someone she didn't know and didn't want to have sex with. To conclude, they stated that it was clear that Coy shot these girls because he didn't want to be held responsible for what he had done to JB. Both girls would have been able to identify him. The prosecution told the jury about the totality of circumstances, stating that when considering all the evidence presented, the pieces of the puzzle make a whole picture. They reminded the jury that guilt could be determined by circumstantial evidence. They said in this case, you don't have to actually see the defendant shoot and kill JB and Tracie to know that he did it. When it came time for the defense to give their closing arguments, they again stated that there was no evidence to tie Coy to the murders. No fingerprints in the car, no witness testimony, no reason. They said there was too much reasonable doubt and he needed to be found not guilty. Observers debated the defense's strategy. Many theorized that at some point between the time Marilyn and Marielle left the girls and saw them turning, they met someone. He might have broken down, but then saw the girls and likely asked them for a ride. Given he was around their same age and probably very charming and convincing, they might have agreed to drive him to his nearby house. However, it was believed. He then pulled out a gun and forced the girls to drive to a hidden area, where he forced JB to get undressed and took advantage of her. He then shot both of them after stuffing them into the trunk of her car. Then he drove the car back to Herring Avenue, which was close enough to his house to walk home. On April 26th, after thinking about it for just a day, the jury found Coy guilty on all counts. Some of the people who were at the trial told the media that Coy's testimony probably did more to make the jurors believe he was guilty than anything else they heard in court, but his friends and family still refused to believe he was guilty. His supporters gathered outside the courthouse. Many of the peaceful protesters were holding signs with the words, "Coy Strong," with Bible verses on the back and front. Next, the jury would have to determine if Coy would be sentenced to life or death. Many family members were asked to read victim impact statements to highlight the loss he had created. JB's mother, Cheryl, stated, "I thought I knew the meaning of devastation, trauma, and being broken. I have a hole inside of me. It's not something you get over. I exist without her." Tracie's mom shared that the toughest moments for her family were during the holidays. The absence of Tracie, an empty chair, was so hard for them. Carol expressed how Tracie was not just her daughter, but her best friend. Every Mother's Day she visits the cemetery. She spoke about the challenges of trying to have normalcy in her life for her sons and shielding them from the pain and giving them a childhood they deserved, and how difficult it was, even decades later. The defense, however, argued there were mitigating factors that showed Coy should only receive life in prison. He didn't have a criminal history. He was present in his children's and grandchildren's lives. He was of value to others. Even his daughter Alicia talked about her childhood, how she had grown up in a loving home. She never saw her parents fight or her father ever being aggressive towards anyone. Coy's wife said he was very family-oriented, a great father, and a good man. She said his children needed him, and she needed him. In closing, the prosecution told the jury that Coy already had 20 years free after murdering JB and Tracie. The man they saw today was a different man back then. That man back then, they argued, wasn't a godly man. That man was a rapist and a murderer. In the end, the jury chose to send Coy to prison for the rest of his life and not sentence him to death. The Alabama Attorney General released a statement. For 23 years, the families of JB, Beasley and Tracie Hawlett have hoped and prayed for justice. While this outcome will not bring their loved ones back, my hope is that it will give them the much-delayed closure they deserve and will give this entire community's faith in the justice system new strength. The verdict handed down today sent a clear message. We have no tolerance in this state for those who heartlessly take the lives of others, especially our youth. Coy's friends and family continued protesting about the verdict. On May 6th, they showed up to Justice Park to voice their concerns, stating he was wrongly convicted. Coy was later formally sentenced to life without parole. His appeal is still pending. After the tragic deaths of JB and Tracie, a memorial was established close to where the Mazda was discovered. It is decorated with flowers, crosses, and angel statues, serving as a reminder that JB and Tracie will never be forgotten. Coy then claimed he went up and talked to the girls. JB mentioned she was running a little late to get home. Coy told her he knew a shortcut back to Dothan and asked if they could drop him off on their way since his car was clearly broken. The girls agreed. He sat in the back passenger seat of the Mazda. This is the part that some observers believed might contain a bit of truth. He said at 11:45 p.m., they left the Big Little. During that drive, Coy chatted with JB while Tracie seemed lost in her own thoughts. About 8 minutes later, they were near the truck stop where Coy parked his semi, so he suggested they stop and take a look at his truck. They pulled over. JB and Coy got out and they got in the front seat of his semi-truck. Tracie stayed in the Mazda. Coy said one thing led to another and they ended up having sex in a bed he had in the back of his semi. The defense asked if he had forced JB into the truck. He said, absolutely not. After they had sex, they talked. Then JB mentioned she was in a hurry to meet someone. They got out of the truck, back into the Mazda. Then Coy asked to be dropped off on Broad Street to avoid being seen by Jeanette. He said the girls dropped him off about 12:30 in the morning and he walked home. Coy then explained that's when he asked Jeanette to go help him jump his car at the Big Little store. They jumped the car and were back home at around 1 a.m. Coy said he stayed home for the rest of the night. The next day, they went to Walmart before he left for his long-haul truck trip. Coy testified he only learned about the murders weeks later when Jeanette told him. He expected the jury to believe he never tried to reach out to Jennifer again, never called her, never saw her again, never tried to reach out again. It was just this random one-night stand. It was unlikely he wouldn't have heard she was murdered if he tried to get in touch with her after the fact. Coy said he gave his DNA because he had nothing to do with the murders. He was shocked when he was arrested because he had no idea what it could be about. He claimed he never told the detectives that he knew the girls when they asked him because he was scared. He figured that once they put him in handcuffs, they had already made up their minds. He expected the jury to believe he never saw pictures of these girls in all the newspapers in the small town. This was a big story featured on TV shows. He couldn't have at least recognized the woman even if he didn't know her name and come forward to say he was with her that night. During the cross-examination by the prosecution, they poked holes in his story one after the other. One of the first things they wanted to know was how JB knew to call Coy's mom's house that night on the 31st. He explained, "Oh, well, I told her I was only there on the weekends, so that's when she would call." The prosecution brought out a notepad, on which they had been writing down things he said happened on July 31st. This is where they put all the problems on display for the jury. According to Coy, he had plans to meet with JB at 1 p.m., describing this as a date. The prosecution pointed out this was a remarkable coincidence. He responded, "I guess so." The prosecution explained that Mariel and Marilyn placed Tracie on the phone with her mom at 11:40 p.m. However, the women could not remember seeing anyone else there at the time, but he claimed he pulled in around 11:35 p.m. When explaining how they had sex, he said they were just talking, and then JB got onto the bed and Coy joined her. They started touching each other. He said it all happened pretty quickly, and they were done by 12 a.m. The prosecution kept challenging Coy's account, stating that it just didn't add up. They carefully went through what Coy said and found problems in every part of his story. The timeline didn't match. The evidence didn't make sense. The prosecution further raised questions about why Coy first told them that he didn't even know JB and Tracie. They explained he was only saying he knew them now because he had to find a way to explain why his semen was found. So he made up a story about consensual sex, a story that made no sense. The prosecution argued that the dirt on the inside of JB's jeans didn't come from consensual sex in the back of a truck. It came from being attacked and forced to undress by someone she didn't know and didn't want to have sex with. To conclude, they stated that it was clear that Coy shot these girls because he didn't want to be held responsible for what he had done to JB. Both girls would have been able to identify him. The prosecution told the jury about the totality of circumstances, stating that when considering all the evidence presented, the pieces of the puzzle make a whole picture. They reminded the jury that guilt could be determined by circumstantial evidence. They said in this case, you don't have to actually see the defendant shoot and kill JB and Tracie to know that he did it. When it came time for the defense to give their closing arguments, they again stated that there was no evidence to tie Coy to the murders. No fingerprints in the car, No witness testimony. No reason. They said there was too much reasonable doubt and he needed to be found not guilty. Observers debated the defense's strategy. Many theorized that at some point between the time Marilyn and Marielle left the girls and saw them turning, they met someone. He might have broken down, but then saw the girls and likely asked them for a ride. Given he was around their same age and probably very charming and convincing, they might have agreed to drive him to his nearby house. However, it was believed. He then pulled out a gun and forced the girls to drive to a hidden area, where he forced JB to get undressed and took advantage of her. He then shot both of them after stuffing them into the trunk of her car. Then he drove the car back to Herring Avenue, which was close enough to his house to walk home. On April 26th, after thinking about it for just a day, the jury found Coy guilty on all counts. Some of the people who were at the trial told the media that Coy's testimony probably did more to make the jurors believe he was guilty than anything else they heard in court, but his friends and family still refused to believe he was guilty. His supporters gathered outside the courthouse. Many of the peaceful protesters were holding signs with the words, "Coy Strong," with Bible verses on the back and front. Next, the jury would have to determine if Coy would be sentenced to life or death. Many family members were asked to read victim impact statements to highlight the loss he had created. JB's mother, Cheryl, stated, "I thought I knew the meaning of devastation, trauma, and being broken. I have a hole inside of me. It's not something you get over. I exist without her." Tracy's mom shared that the toughest moments for her family were during the holidays. The absence of Tracy, an empty chair, was so hard for them. Carol expressed how Tracy was not just her daughter, but her best friend. Every Mother's Day she visits the cemetery. She spoke about the challenges of trying to have normalcy in her life for her sons and shielding them from the pain and giving them a childhood they deserved, and how difficult it was, even decades later. The defense, however, argued there were mitigating factors that showed Coy should only receive life in prison. He didn't have a criminal history. He was present in his children's and grandchildren's lives. He was of value to others. Even his daughter Alicia talked about her childhood, how she had grown up in a loving home. She never saw her parents fight or her father ever being aggressive towards anyone. Coy's wife said he was very family-oriented, a great father, and a good man. She said his children needed him, and she needed him. In closing, the prosecution told the jury that Coy already had 20 years free after murdering JB and Tracy. The man they saw today was a different man back then. That man back then, they argued, wasn't a godly man. That man was a rapist and a murderer. In the end, the jury chose to send Coy to prison for the rest of his life and not sentence him to death. The Alabama Attorney General released a statement. For 23 years, the families of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett have hoped and prayed for justice. While this outcome will not bring their loved ones back, my hope is that it will give them the much-delayed closure they deserve and will give this entire community's faith in the justice system new strength. The verdict handed down today sent a clear message. We have no tolerance in this state for those who heartlessly take the lives of others, especially our youth. Coy's friends and family continued protesting about the verdict. On May 6th, they showed up to Justice Park to voice their concerns, stating he was wrongly convicted. Coy was later formally sentenced to life without parole. His appeal is still pending. After the tragic deaths of JB and Tracy, a memorial was established close to where the Mazda was discovered. It is decorated with flowers, crosses, and angel statues, serving as a reminder that JB and Tracy will never be forgotten. The resolution of the J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett case, 23 years in the making, brought a complex blend of relief and sorrow to Ozark. For the families, the conviction of Coy McCraney marked the end of an agonizing wait. It was proof of their never-ending determination and the advancements in forensic science that finally brought answers. Yet no verdict could truly fill the void left by two vibrant young lives, nor erase the decades of pain and unanswered questions. The case became a touching symbol, not only of enduring loss but also of a community's enduring memory, forever reminding residents of the night two girls vanished and the long, hard path that ultimately led to justice, however delayed. Thanks for being here and listening. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest stories. Stay safe and take care of your loved ones.